Hello and welcome to Expat Coffee Break. My name is Javier, and this is a podcast dedicated to sharing personal experiences of immigrants and telling their stories of what it's like to move to a new country. This show has been inspired by casual and fun conversations that I had with other expats at my workplace during lunch or coffee breaks, where we discuss our experiences, cultural differences, and stories about our life abroad. Most of the time it's a bunch of Latinos joking around in Spanish, but once in a while, more serious conversations take place. In this episode, I will share my experience making friends in Minnesota, what it was like for a Mexican to live, what it has been like for a Mexican to live in the Midwest of the United States, experiencing the Midwest culture. Like I mentioned before, I was somewhat familiarized with the American culture, but most of what I had seen growing up was the southern part of California, which is very different to Minnesota. I mean, just by the weather, it's always warm over there, and it has a huge Hispanic population. It was very hard for me to practice my English whenever I visited my family in California. But in Minnesota, that is a part of the Midwest, I got to live a very different experience. I will be talking about my experience making friends in Minnesota, embracing the culture by getting into some of the outdoor activities like fishing and camping, and overall, what it's my experience meeting new people. And spoiler alert, it has been a great experience. I can't complain, except maybe for the snow. And with that, let's begin with today's ranting session. Enjoy! Let's talk about making new friends. Meeting people and making new friends might sound easy. One does not appreciate how difficult it is until you move to a new place. Just think about it. Your social circle is usually your immediate family, friends from school or work, but if you move out of town, you need to start over. And if you move to another country with a different culture, well, that is an even greater barrier. Everything about Minnesota was new to us. The weather, buildings, stores, the people. I thought I will not see many Mexicans, but turns out there's a big Hispanic community. However, that does not guarantee you will be making friends quickly. For me, it has been relatively easy. I was interacting with people at work, so I got to talk to them, go to the happy hour every once in a while with them. I got invited for dinners, I'm going out, etc. But without that work environment, going to the office environment, making new friends would have been more difficult. And I got to experience that through my wife, and also in 2020 when our entire office was working from home, because of the virus. My experience making new friends in Minnesota begins hanging out with work colleagues, of course, meeting their family, going out for dinners or drinks, watching the Super Bowl, adult social stuff. And I am incredibly grateful to all that opened their homes and invited us over for dinner or spending the holidays. For someone that is far from their family and friends and that just moved to a strange place, it means a lot. I want to mention a few friends and my experience hanging out with them that made a big difference in our lives when we first moved. Starting with Mama Jane and her family. Jane and I used to work in the same department. She is from Minnesota, and I call her Mama Jane because she's around being a mom for everybody. I mean, she's also my mom's age, but it's more about the way she acts around everyone. And even though we had just met, she made sure to look out for me and that we had what we needed, felt welcome. Her entire family was very good to us, and we had a really nice time together. Jane and her sisters are always inviting us over for dinner, barbecues, holidays, or weekend trips. I got to hang out with most of their family and spend Thanksgiving with them back in the good old days before the pandemic, and it has been a very, very nice experience. Her entire family is super nice. I love hanging out with them because they are like older cousins instead of just aunties. Shout out to my brother Kyle, aka K-Man. We live in the same apartment building, so we hang out often. We have similar interests, and it has been easy for us to talk since day one. And we also go out for lunch every other Friday and just talk about whatever we're doing during that week. He also pushes me to publish new episode of this podcast, and he was self-appointed as my biggest fan. A couple that has also been very good to us and made us feel welcome has been Kirk and Lisa. They made a huge impact in our life in Minnesota, and they also happen to be from a different place. Kirk is originally from California. He was in the army, and during that time he was stationed in the Philippines, where he met Lisa. They moved back to the United States and eventually moved to Minnesota to work for the same company as me. I think they understand what it's like to be new in town and immediately jumped in the welcoming committee to make us feel better. We love spending time with them. Lisa makes great dinners, and Kirk enjoys talking about video games and anime shows. Yep, that's a thing with me. I love geeking out with friends. And another thing we do is drink and play board games. Sometimes we set up our little casino after dinner and spend several hours shouting Uno or Loteria or whatever game we're playing. Fun times with great friends. Then there's the tea timers. Remember that the show's inspired by other bunch of Latinos? Well, that group, it's called the Turbo Tea Timers. I honestly don't know where the name came from, but it sounds pretty cool. Those guys are Manuel, Danny, Amaury, and Corey. Manuel is from Colombia, Danny from Venezuela, Amaury from Brazil, Corey from the United States. Corey is from Las Vegas. I know he's not Latino, but he's the most Hispanic gringo I have ever met. All of those guys are very welcoming. They open their house. They offer their friendship from day one. There's a group of guys that are into the outdoor activities, and we're happy to include me in their fishing trips. This is Andy, Nick, Chris, and Darren. Thanks to Andy, I have been able to go to many adventures and was able to catch my first fish in a special place called the Boundary Waters. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a very, very nice place to go. In summary, making friends at work was easy for me. I was fortunate to have people around that were willing to make us feel welcome and invited us to meet their family. And to all of them, I am infinitely grateful. Now, from my wife's perspective, it was a little more complicated. She didn't have anywhere to go out at the beginning to meet new people. She was not making friends of her own. She left good girlfriends back in Mexico, and she is the kind of person that has a hard time meeting new people and making new friends. Unlike me, I want to be friends with everyone. But without having a place to go to work, your chances of meeting new people are slim, especially if you are introverted. Things started to change little by little when she started going to school for English classes and met someone that became a very dear friend to both of us. Oscar was going to school preparing to take a GED test. He immigrated to the US when he was very young and didn't have a chance to finish school back then. That was in early 2019. He passed the test, of course, by now, and now is taking college classes. The man can't stay still and is an inspiration to me when it comes to hard work and dedication. Oscar quickly became a dear friend. He constantly inviting us to be with his family. His wife, Grace, is one of the most educated persons I've ever met. Whenever we go to their house, I don't ever want to leave. We spend hours talking at the dining table. I get to learn so much from both of them, and we share similar perspective, and sometimes we debate interesting topics, but overall, we really enjoy spending time with them. Then my wife started a part-time job in a Chipotle restaurant where she has made a few friends and started interacting with other people. Even if some of those are just customers, I bet she was tired of talking just with me. What's funny is that during 2020, our roles were inverted. She's the one leaving the apartment to go to work, and I have been working from home since. Now I'm losing my mind being indoor all the time, and she is tired after work and just wants to come back and relax after dealing with customers all day. One great thing from this year is that another couple from Mexico moved to Minnesota. Martin and Diana moved in early 2020. Now it was our turn to be part of the welcoming committee, and it felt great helping them to feel like home. And during that process, we created a nice friendship. We hang out so often that their son calls me uncle. The little guy, it's a handful, and I love playing with him. As far as making friends, I can't complain. I'm lucky to have so many great persons around me that were willing to welcome me and my wife. However, I do notice it is difficult to meet new people. What I'm going to say is my perception living in Minnesota. However, I believe the same applies to any place. I've been moving from one city to another since I was 18, and I had similar experiences in Mexico as well. So a little bit of background of why I think what I think about Minnesota. And pretty much, I think the culture here in the Midwest. So Minnesota was founded with immigrants from France, Germany, and Central Europe that settled around the 18th century. And since then, for a long time, there were not that many people around wanting to move to Minnesota. I mean, it's not a surprise that over 80% of Minnesota's population is white and has deep family roots. My perception is that most Minnesotans interact with their immediate family and friends from their community and have little interest in knowing a different culture. Of course, I might be wrong, but I got that perception from the people I interacted with outside of my work environment. They don't tend to be particularly eager to speak with an immigrant if they don't have to. I had a couple of experiences that made me think that way, and I will talk about that in another episode, but overall, I think it's not easy for someone new to come in and be part of a social circle right away. Maybe it's people not wanting to interact with someone that looks different than them, or maybe because they have little interest in knowing other cultures, thinking theirs is the best and it shouldn't change. I don't know. That's my perception. But like I said, this happens in other places as well. I remember having a conversation with a Cuban girl when I was in Hermosillo, Sonora. And she complained about how difficult it is to meet new people because not everyone is willing to interact with her, and how reluctant people were to experimenting a new culture. And to her, our Sonoran culture seemed boring and lacked flavor. I thought that was an interesting perspective, and I wanted to share that with my experience. Just think from the perspective of an immigrant. You already made whatever sacrifice to move to a new country, but that is just the beginning. Then you need to break that barrier so that you can call the new place home. It is not easy. Of course, there are things that you can do to improve that, but it also depends on the people that you are interacting with, as there will be people that are closed-minded and there will be open-minded person. Just learn to walk away from those that are not interested in you. And now, about embracing the Midwest culture by doing outdoor activities, that was my strategy to break my barrier and embracing the culture. It was by experiencing outdoor activities that Minnesotans do that I couldn't do back in Mexico, like hiking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, camping, fishing, ice fishing, all of this fun stuff. Minnesota has so many parks, trails, and lakes that you can have a very outdoorsy life all year round. even during the winter if you dare to go out during the cold. Which brings me to the weather. I mean, we moved right in the peak of winter. And for a Mexican couple that moved from Sonora, Mexico, that is a desert, experiencing the Minnesotan weather was a huge deal. I think it was the biggest cultural shock, and it amplified everything. Things were more difficult going out, getting groceries, shopping, driving, getting gas. Everything was short. Everything was cold. Everything was gloomy. And if you remember part of our story, we moved in January, right in the freaking winter. Just imagine getting in your car and everything is so cold that you have to drive wearing gloves. Unless you have a fancy car and with a heated steering wheel, but unfortunately that is not my case. The first couple of weeks we tried going out to some festivals downtown, but we couldn't last more than 30 minutes since we didn't have proper winter shoes and our feet were freezing. I had never experienced that, being in a place so cold that my feet were numb. Even after we had proper shoes and clothing, it was still hard to go out. Everything is cold and your face hurts from the chill. In the beginning, it was very daunting, but I was still eager to experience the wilderness and see the nature in Minnesota. So we started going out on day trips and visiting state parks during the spring months. And I mean Minnesotan spring. Snow does not melt until May sometimes. And we walked around the parks, took a lot of pictures, rented some gear to do snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. We had a lot of fun, and things started to change. We started enjoying living in Minnesota, and the cold was not so bad anymore. Then the guys from the office invited me to a few fishing trips and camping trips, and I enjoyed that so much that it made me appreciate the seasons and tolerate the cold much better. The two most memorable trips were my trip to the Boundary Waters and an ice fishing trip. In the first one, it was kind of rough. It was a rough trip where we spent 6 days in the Boundary Waters. It's called the Boundary Waters Canoe Area. And we had to carry all of our food, clothes, and gear. We were doing that along with portaging, carrying our canoes, and traveling around the different lakes. That place is magical. The second trip was a more relaxed experience. We rented a charter service that provided transportation into the frozen lake and all of the gear and heated fishing house. All we did was bring alcohol and food and spend the entire day fishing, drinking, and eating. Very, very fun times. Of course, my wife didn't go with me to these trips. Those were not her kind of trip. It's a little too rough. But now that my wife and I have a couple of winters experience, things are not so bad. Even driving in the snowstorm that seemed to be like the end of the world to me, I can handle it much better now. Overall, we have met very nice people, and I have been quite happy. Every person has positively impacting us in its own way. For anyone that might be looking to move to a different place, not just the United States or Minnesota, I would recommend embracing the culture as fast as possible. There is a reason why people living in that place, as cold and gloomy as it might seem sometimes, and that was tough for me at the beginning, but things might change once you decide to embrace the activities that make life fun. And who knows? Maybe you will start making new friends through those experiences. And with that, my friends, I conclude this episode. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to a Mexican dude rambling about his experiences moving to the United States. I really enjoy having this creative outlet that helps me focus on constructive things, especially when I write about the good experiences and the people that I have met. It allows me to be introspective, count my blessings, and be grateful for what I have. Thanks again. Thanks a million times. I have nothing but gratitude to anyone listening and giving me their feedback after each episode. I'll leave my contact info in the show notes. Feel free to reach out. And if you have a suggestion or about a topic for me to talk about, or you would like to be in the podcast, all right. Thank you very much. and talk to you later. Adios.